I slowly opened my eyes. My head was swimming and a dull pain surrounded my throat. I was thirsty. That was the first thing I noticed. I licked my dry lips as my surroundings faded into focus. My body ached and I realized it was because I was tightly bound to a metal chair in the middle of an empty room. The barren concrete walls were stained and dirty. The floor beneath my bare feet was cold and slightly wet. A single bulb lit the room, dangling from the ceiling by a string. It cast moving shadows and I blinked back darkness. An open door stood before me, but I couldn't see anything but the wall of a hallway. I tried to clear my head, tried to remember how I got here. I squeezed my eyes shut and forced myself not to panic. I slowed my breathing and focused my thoughts, desperately trying to summon some kind of recollection of why I was here. I couldn't remember anything. I opened my eyes and exhaled, my parched throat throbbing. I could hear sound echoing off the hallway walls outside the door. Screaming, clanging, howling, all very distant, but that did nothing to help calm my nerves. "Hello?" I cried, the word tearing at my vocal cords. I felt my chest itch in pain, but I cleared my throat and yelled again. "Is anyone there? Hello?" The dark hallway remained silent except for the constant echoes. I shut my mouth and tried to wiggle free from my bindings, but the rope was knotted impossibly tight. I fought back against my imagination as it flooded my mind with horrific scenarios of what awaited me, if I could only remember. Suddenly, footsteps erupted from outside the door, a rapid patter of small feet. My hopes rose and I trained my attention to the door, praying it was help. A young boy ran into the room, dressed in a red onesie, complete with padded feet. Stretched over his face was a plastic devil mask. The eye holes revealed massive blue eyes that greeted me curiously. Taken back, I opened my mouth to speak, but that's when I noticed something was off. His eyes were huge, impossibly round and bulging from their sockets. It sent a shiver of unease down my spine, but I shook it off. This child might be able to free me. "Hey," I hissed urgently. "Hey kid, can you get me out of here?" The boy took a step closer, cocking his head, but remained silent. I rattled my bound arms against the chair. "Cut me free, please. I shouldn't be here. This is some kind of mistake." The boy eyed me behind his strange mask and stopped directly in front of me. He leaned in close and whispered, his voice like wet silk. "You did a bad thing." Confused, I shook my head. No, this is a mistake. I didn't do anything." The boy's enormous blue eyes suddenly filled with sadness. "Oh, you did a really, really bad thing." I shook my head violently. "No, I'm sorry. I don't remember. Just please get me out of this chair." Suddenly, before either of us could speak again, a man came charging into the room. He was overweight and dressed in overalls, his grizzled face twisted in seething anger. He was holding a sawed-off shotgun in his arms. "I didn't do anything," I cried as he advanced on us, my voice cracking. "I'm not supposed to be here." The big man ignored me and instead grabbed the kid and shoved him hard against the wall. The boy grunted as his back struck the concrete and his eyes rose to meet the grizzled man's. Wordlessly, the man raised his shotgun, placed it against the boy's forehead, and blew his head off. Chunks of gore splattered the wall as shock sludged me in the stomach like an iron fist. My eyes rang, and time seemed to slow as I watched in horror as the headless body crumpled to the ground. My breath rushed back into my lungs and time seemed to readjust. "Jesus fucking Christ," I screamed, straining against the ropes, my eyes bulging in horrific shock. "What the fuck?" The man ignored my screams as he bent down and picked up the boy. He slung the ruined corpse over his shoulder and walked out his doorway. Suddenly, the hallway erupted with malicious laughter, a chorus of voices all howling in glee. I shut my eyes, the noise deafening. An absolute terror filled my every pore. After a few minutes, the laughter faded and I cautiously opened my eyes, unable to believe what I had just witnessed. "Hello?" I jumped as I realized there was another man standing before me. He was dressed in a simple white button-down shirt and jeans. His brown hair was cut short and he appeared to be in his early 30s. His green eyes were dull and lifeless, his full lips pulled down at the corners. "What is going on? Where am I?" I cried, new fear pooling in my stomach like hot blood. The man crossed his arms. "So, you're the new one, huh?" He shook his head. "You people disgust me." Questions bubbled on my lips, but he waved them off with a sharp chop of his hand, slicing the air and demanding my silence. He ran his tongue over his teeth, sneering. You look like you've already seen some of the horrors this place holds, huh? Yes. I can tell by the look in your eyes. You're terrified. You've seen something, haven't you? It doesn't seem all that bad now, does it? Looking back, you've been here 5 minutes and already shitting your pants. Where am I gasped, unable to hold back any longer. What do you people want? The man crossed his arms behind his back. How about you want to get out of here, don't you? I bet you'd like to go back to your home, your family, everything. Please, I interrupted. Whatever I did to you, I'm sorry. I really am, but I don't remember. The man rolled his eyes. You didn't do anything to me. You did it to yourself. You really don't remember anything? I shook my head and felt tears brimming in my eyes, liquid fear. The man looked at me with contempt. You waited until your wife left for work and then you went out to the woodshed and hung yourself. You're dead. The recent memory rose in my mind like a monster from a bog. My eyes went wide. As much as I wanted to deny it, he was right. I had K'd myself. The incident tore through my brain like a bullet train and left me reeling. I'm Danny, by the way, the man said, ignoring the shocked look on my face. And I'm number 2 here. I run the orientation process. I want to make this quick because I'm tired of repeating this fucking thing to you pathetic S-words. You get one question before I begin. He stared down at me, and I scrambled to organize my thoughts into something cohesive. That was all horrifying. Why had I K'd myself? I fought against the fog and panic, and the mists of confusion slowly began to lift. I just lost my job. Yes, that was a start. I squeezed my eyes shut and forced more of the memory to emerge. I lost my job, and I was about to lose the house, my wife, Tess. She found out and was going to leave me. I didn't have any way out, didn't have any options. Getting fired had come out of the blue, and I didn't have much in savings. I was broke, soon to be homeless, and my wife hated me for it. There was something else. Yes, that's right. She'd been cheating on me. I'd seen texts on her phone while she slept one night, and I confirmed my suspicions. My life had degraded to shit, and I had run out of my options. Humiliated and ashamed, I had decided death was my only option. Hey fucker, do you have any question or not? Danny said, snapping his fingers in front of my face. I was sucked back into reality, and I asked the only question that mattered. Is this hell? Danny snorted. That's always what people asked. He began to pace back and forth in front of me. No, this is not hell. It's not heaven either. This is the Black Farm. And no, I didn't name it. This is where God sends the souls who have ended their own life. S-words. You see, he doesn't really know what to do with you, and neither does the devil. They're genuinely good people who K themselves. Seems cruel to banish them to hell for all of eternity for a moment of weakness, right? Personally, I think God and the devil were just tired of arguing about it. And so they send them here, to the Black Farm. Did God create this place, I asked, growling more and more confused. Danny spit on the floor, chuckling. Sure, at some point, but he lost control of it when he put the pig in charge. What's the pig, I asked, unsure I wanted to know the answer. Danny held up his hand, annoyed. Can I fucking finish? God created this place eons ago, put the pig in charge, and then forgot about it for a while. Well, when his back was turned, the pig decided to use his new powers to try and create his own little world. This mess you see around you is the fractured remains of that experiment. The Black Farm used to be a lot nicer, but the pig wanted things to be different. He wanted to create his own vision. These people you see, these monsters, they are the pig's attempts to creating functioning life. Instead of mirroring God's earth, these mutated, horrible creations are full of sin and hatred. They run rampant here, unabashed. This place is chaos. The Black Farm is a circus of freaks and monsters, and it's your eternity. Fear boiled in my gut like thick oil. No, this couldn't be the end. I didn't believe in stuff like this. This wasn't real. I'd wake up soon and realize I was just having a nightmare. That had to be it. Danny stood before me and lightly slapped my face. Hey, don't get into hysterics on me. I haven't finished yet. I raised my teary eyes to meet his. Danny smiled. You can always feed the pig. My breath pushed from my lungs like burning steam. What does that mean? Danny spread his hands, still smiling. It's as simple as that. Feed the pig. If you do so, there's a chance he'll send you back to your life. And what happens if it doesn't? I bumbled. You get sent to hell, so flip a coin if you have one. Stay here with us or feed the pig. If you choose to stay, I'll let you go. I'll let you go out there, he said, pointing towards the door. But let me assure you, what awaits you at the end of the hallway, well, let's just say that hell isn't that much worse. I swallowed hard, trying my best to digest everything. Why wouldn't I try feeding the pig? Whatever that meant, if there was even a sliver of hope, I would take it. An eternity of this place? The Black Farm? Be sent to hell or be feed the pig? I would do anything for a chance to go back. This nightmare made my problems seem nothing in comparison. Danny raised a hand before I could speak. I'll let you think on it for a while. I'll be back later. I want to feed the pig, I cried, not wanting to spend another second in this awful room. I could hear a woman screaming down the hallway, her cries rising as something meaty pounding her. My breath came in sharp pulls and my throat burned. Danny noticed the noise and grinned. Sounds pretty bad, huh? He said softly as the woman's voice creaked with agony. Something was still slamming into her, the sound of beaten flesh igniting my imagination with horrors. Please, I gasped breathlessly. Just let me feed the pig. I don't want to stay here any longer. Danny turned away from me. I'll be back later. Enjoy your time alone. Really think about your situation. Weigh your options, and remember, you put yourself here. And with that, he was gone, leaving me in the dim room. Tears streamed down my face. The woman didn't stop screaming for hours. At some point, I fell into a semi-sleep. The darkness in the room seemed to press in on me, and my eyes fluttered shut. My body ached and my throat was a halo of fire. Thirst racked my windpipe like sharp glass. My lips felt like crumpled paper. My head thundered like a drum. The room swam in and out of focus, and my mind drifted towards the horrific sounds that never ended. I was lost in a haze, unaware that something was sliding into the room until I felt a sharp prick on my big toe. I jolted out of my daze as my bare foot ignited with pain. I screamed and tried to move, but my bindings held me tight. The room rushed back into focus, and I blinked in agony as I felt blood trickle between my toes. I looked down for the source of pain, and I felt a scream claw up my throat. Staring up at me was an armless man. He slithered on the floor like a worm, his bald head scabbed and filthy. His legs were wrapped together in barbed wire, forcing him to wriggle his body to move. His eyes were lidless and wide, two bloodshot white orbs that stared up at me with hungry intensity. His teeth had been removed and replaced with long screws which jutted from his bleeding gums like a broken rock formation. Around his neck was a chain leash, which I followed across the floor to the open door. The end of the leash was held by a tall, naked man. His body was hairless and flabby, covered in similar scabs like his pet. A dirty bag was pulled over his head that hid his features except for a single red eye that peeked out at me from a crude cut in the cloth. He stared at me and groped his engorged P-word, his breath heavy and labored. As the armless man wriggled towards me again, his master started to M-word. I screamed as the screw filled my mouth and bit me again, and my cries seemed to stimulate the naked man even more. Get off me, stop it, I screamed, horrified. I tried to kick at the man, doing my best to avoid his sharp metal teeth. I brought my heel down on his head and he screamed as his face bounced off the floor. A moan of pleasure escaped the bagged man's mouth, and I turned away as a mist of black sprayed out on the floor. There was a rattle of chains, and I turned back to see the two of them leaving, the armless man dragged by his neck out the door. I looked at where the bagged man had E-word and saw a puddle of dead ants. I vomited onto myself, thick, chunky curtains of bile and slime. Get me out of here, I screamed, strands of puke running down my chin. I don't belong here. I listened to the two men retreat down the hallway, the clank of chains accompanied by the sound of flesh being dragged onto the concrete. I screamed again, but I knew no one was going to help me. I spit a wad of phlegm and bile onto the floor, ridding my mouth of its soreness. I forced myself to calm down. It wasn't easy. After some time, I heard someone else approaching. I'd been in a miserable lull, my mind a blank canvas of dark despair, but the noise roused me from my trance-like state. The muscles in my arms burned from being restrained for so long, and I shifted them desperately, trying my best to prepare myself for whatever horror was about to walk through the door. Footsteps drew closer, and then a woman walked into the room. She stopped at the doorway and looked at me. One of her eyes was missing, a dark, cavernous hole in her skull. Her hair was ratty and wild, a brown tangle like a forgotten nest. Her skin was pale and filthy, and she was dressed in rags. I couldn't tell how old she was, but there was maturity in her one good eye. Still thinking? She asked, her voice coarse and brittle. What? She took a step closer. Are you still deciding whether you're going to feed the pig or not? I looked at her cautiously. Yeah, I am. Who are you? What do you want? I was once where you are now, she said, trying to decide my fate. I couldn't believe that this was what happened after we die. It wasn't what I thought. Religion didn't warn me about this place. I tested my bindings again before asking. You K'd yourself too? You're a person like me? You're not one of those creations? She snorted. Breaks my heart you have to ask, though. She touched the hole where her eye should have been. Though I can understand your caution. Yeah, I'm a S-word. I've been here a long, long time. But that was my choice. I decided to chance it here. I mentioned with my head towards the door. What's out there? What is all this? She exhaled heavily and leaned against the wall. I can't even begin to describe this place. It's like nothing you've ever seen. You walk down that hallway and go out and into it, and she swallowed. You'd have to see it to understand. How bad is it? Why are all these mutated people hurting and killing each other? I asked. She let her head loll back against the wall. It would take years for you to fully understand this place, years you don't have. Right now you have to make a decision. Stay or feed the pig. They tell me hell is worse than here, but it can't be by much. Monsters and S-words roam the Black Farm, killing, R-wording, brutalizing, and then you wake up and wonder how long you can survive before something else kills you. It's an endless cycle. So why did you stay? I pressed. Why didn't you feed the pig? I don't even know what that means, but I would do anything for a chance to go back. I can't stay here. I just can't. She smiled sadly at me. Why? Why did I choose this? It's simple, really. I'm a coward. I was a coward when I was alive, and I'm a coward in death. When it came down to it, when the moment presented itself, I chose to stay here. I didn't know what waited me outside. It boiled down to a simple choice fueled by my own fear. What is the pig? What does it do to you? I pressed. She suddenly turned to go. I'm afraid that's for you to find out, but let me warn you. Think hard before you make a decision. Sometimes suffering through your fear is better than suffering for eternity. Be brave. What do? I yelled, shaking in my chair as she walked out the door. She paused and took one last look over her shoulder. Her eyes darted around and she dropped her voice to a whisper. Feed the pig. And with that, she was gone. I sat in silence once again. My mind was spinning, desperately churning over all my options. I still couldn't fully understand the situation I was in. It was too much, too overwhelming. The other side of death wasn't supposed to be like this. I didn't know what I had expected, but it wasn't this nightmare. Questions crashed over my mind like cold waves onto a sinking ship. How was I supposed to make a choice when I didn't even know what my actions entailed? This place, the Black Farm, I couldn't stay here, but what if I went to hell? What if I didn't get sent back? I'd be out of the fire and into the frying pan. My existence would forever be damned to an unending misery. Here, though, there were people like me, S-words. It wasn't all monsters and mutilated murderers. Maybe I could hole up somewhere with them, try to scrape together a passable existence. Surely that would be better than getting sent to hell. No, this wasn't going to be how I spent my eternity. I refused to let it be. If there was even the slightest sliver of hope, I would take it. I didn't want to wonder what could have been. I didn't want to be tormented by doubt. I would feed the pig and accept whatever fate chose for me. When I boiled it down, there was only one option left. I would feed the pig. Hey, hello, Danny, I yelled, rattling in my chair. I made my decision, Danny! After a couple seconds, I heard footsteps echo down the hall towards me. Danny walked through the doorway, so annoyed look on his face. I made my choice, I said. I'm gonna feed the pig. Sounds like you've really thought a lot about it since I left you, Danny said sarcastically. I licked my lips. You'd do the same thing if you were in my place. Danny walked behind me. I was in your place once, and I chose differently. My eyes widened, and then Danny wrapped my entire head with a strip of thin cloth, binding me. I sucked in as much air as I could, but each lung felt empty. I felt Danny cut me free from the chair, and my body sighed as my stiff muscles were released. I rolled my shoulders as my hands were released, and I moaned with relief. I dug my fingers into my back, and I stretched, my bones creaking. "Keep your blindfold on and follow me," Danny said, pulling me up. My legs shook as I put weight on them, my thighs trembling after their long cemented position. I groped blindly in front of me and found Danny's shoulder. I rested my hand on it and he walked us out of the room. As we entered the hallway, I could suddenly hear sounds I hadn't before. The clank of metal, a long, fleshy, tearing noise, something vomiting. These sounds sprang to life in my ears, painting the darkness before my eyes with imaginary scenes of horror. I gripped Danny's shoulder tighter, stumbling behind him, my heart thundering. I heard something trailing behind us, but Danny didn't seem to notice. Or if he did, he didn't care. Flesh slapped the concrete mere inches behind me, and I suddenly felt hot breath on my neck and the click of a wet tongue against gums. My breathing became even more labored as fear choked me. "Going in ya to feed the pig, are ya?" something whispered in my ear. I felt something press against the back of my head, and I tried not to think about what it might be. It was wet and slimy, and I heard the thing chuckle. "He's a hungry pig. You make sure he gets his meal now." The thing whispered again, its voice low and unlike anything I'd ever heard before. It was like a series of grunts and moans jumbled together to form broken words. To my relief, I heard the thing retreat back to wherever it came from, and I continued to follow Danny. He remained silent as we walked, and I could feel shifts in my air. The thick heat gave way to a cooler, almost pleasant temperature, but then it kept decreasing, and soon I was shivering violently against the coal. I couldn't see anything, but I felt a breeze on my face, like we were outside. I didn't hear Danny open any doors, but nothing about this place was natural. It was like reality blurred and bled into itself, like reels of film melting together. Teeth chattering, I was suddenly blasted with intense heat and I gasped. My feet tripped over themselves as the terrain changed, and I was suddenly walking on what felt like warm iron. My ears were filled with the sound of blazing furnaces and the clash of working machinery. I couldn't see it, but I felt like there was a vast open expanse overhead. I smelled ash and tasted dirt on my tongue, sweat already forming along my spine. Suddenly, I crashed into Danny as he came to a halt. I backed up a few places, quickly, and muttered my apologies. I could hear movement in front of us, a rustle of chains and an old clicking sound on the metal floor. Something else too. Something snorting. And then this room filled with a deafening sound of an immense pig squealing. I covered my ears, head splitting at the high-pitched wail. I gripped my teeth as the noise echoed off the metal and faded into a series of snorts and grunts. It sounded absolutely enormous. "I brought another one," Danny announced, a slight tinge of respect lining his voice. "He wants to feed the pig." I waited, expecting to hear some answer, the cloth around my eyes sealing my sight to darkness. I realized my knees were shaking and my back was coated in sweat. I was terrified. "If that is what you wish," Danny said, and I felt him bow under my hand. Apparently some unseen conversation had just happened, and Danny took my wrist and pushed me forward. "Approach the pig," he instructed. My whole body trembled and my knees locked in place. Robbed from sight, I raised my hand, trying to get my bearings. The heat and ash filled my head with nausea. I felt like I was going to throw up, my stomach rolling like a dead sea. I didn't know where I was or what horror lay before me. I felt lost and tiny, a fresh splash of tears dripping from my eyes and soaking into the cloth around my face. Please, I beg. Let me see what's happening." Danny was suddenly behind me, pushing me forward. He guided my hands towards something as we stepped together in unison. Even with the cloth around my face, I could see a giant mass of towering darkness before me. It was a spot of black on an already darkened canvas. As we walked forward, I was suddenly assaulted by a horrendous smell and I gagged, turning away. Danny's grip tightened and forced me to continue. I could sense something just in front of me, a living, shifting mass of flesh. The smell increased to be a wretched level, and I gagged again. Then, hot air was being blown on my face, a blast of heat that came in repeated short bursts. I vomited into the cloth, the source of the smell stemming from the hot air. I choked as the bile gushed over the fabric, soaking it and momentarily cutting off my oxygen. Danny slapped my hands again, and I took a few seconds to steady my breathing again. I was openly crying now, fear and misery collapsing my willpower. The wet cloth stunk as I sucked in soggy breaths. My own stomach acid coated my skin, and I begged for all of this to be over. And then something squealed directly in front of me. I felt my bladder go. I was standing before the pig. It was the source of darkness in my obscured vision, a fat, titanic creature that filled my senses with every breath it blew into my face. Danny raised my hands and suddenly I was touching the pig's snout. I recoiled immediately, but Danny forced my hands back. Its fur was stiff and brittle, and as my shaking hands explored up its nose, the size of the animal became clear to me. It was gigantic and had weighed over a ton. Its flesh wiggled under my sweating hands, and it opened its mouth slightly. My fingers curled around teeth the size of kitchen knives, and I realized its mouth was absolutely carnivorous. The pig squealed again, and I heard its hoofs clack against the ground. It sounded like thunder rolling across an open field in the middle of summer. "Take this blindfold off, please," I begged, my legs turning to jelly. Danny had taken a few steps back, and I heard reverence in his voice. "You don't want to do that." I jumped as the pig nudged me with its nose, the wet circle of flesh squishing against the length of my face. I shuddered away, raising my hands and emitting a cry of fear. "Feed the pig," Danny instructed, his voice like cold steel now. "You made your choice, now live with it. It's the only chance you have of going back. Or maybe the pig won't like how you taste and send you to hell. Only one way to find out." My eyes widened behind the vomit-soaked cloth. "Won't like how I taste?" "Climb into its mouth." My bladder let go again and I felt warm piss run down my leg. No, you can't mean." Danny's voice hardened. "Climb into its mouth and don't stop crawling forward until it's done with you." "But please," I begged, turning towards Danny's voice, reaching out blindly. "Please, there has to be some other way. Don't make me do this." I was a mess of snot and tears, my words bumbling from my mouth like a toddler. Danny stepped forward and spun me back to face the pig. "Do it! You made your choice. It will all be over soon. This is your only chance." I could feel the pig breathing over my face, its snout mere inches from mine. The smell and heat it emitted made me want to vomit again, but I held it back. This was insane. This wasn't happening. My mind spun and twisted in chaos and fear. There had to be some other way. I couldn't do this. I could not do this. Suddenly, I remember the words of the woman. "Sometimes suffering through your fear is better than suffering for eternity. Be brave." This was my only chance to get back to the world of the living. I had made such a terrible mistake in killing myself. If I could go back and change my life, I wouldn't have to spend eternity here. I could change my ways, ensure a spot somewhere else, somewhere away from the pig. But what if I decided to send me to hell? How much more suffering could I endure? I had to take the chance. "Please, God," I whispered, taking a step forward. "If you can hear me, please have mercy on me." My shaking hands reached out for the pig and I grasped its thick fur. I felt it slowly lower its head and open its mouth. It was waiting for me. Its thick, hot breath stinking in my nostrils. This was it. No turning back now. I slowly gripped its teeth and pulled myself forward into its jaws. Its head was at a downward angle, and so I immediately fell into my stomach at a 45-degree angle. Its wet tongue switched under me, and I was shaking so hard I could barely breathe. Tears soaked my blindfold, and my heart crunched against my ribs. I slowly reached forward and found another tooth to grab onto. Gritting my teeth, I pulled my body inward past my knees. The pig raised its head, and I was suddenly completely horizontal on its tongue. Saliva and mucus dripped around me, and the heat was so intense I almost blacked out. My knees clacked against its front teeth as I pulled myself even deeper. Its inner cheeks pressed in around me, squeezing my body like a soaking fleshing coffin. Crying, terrified, I reached ahead of me and found more teeth. I pulled myself deeper into its mouth and I felt my feet slide past its lips. My whole body was coated in slime and I openly wept, grasping in the darkness for another tooth. And that's when the pig started to chew on me. I screamed in crushing agony as my body was compressed between its massive teeth. I heard my legs snap instantly and felt wet bone pop from my skin. I shook violently as my body spasmed in shock, a mangled twist of blood and pain. Its tongue shifted me in its mouth and I felt it bite down on my shoulder. My eyes bulged in their sockets as I howled, a hot pillar crunching down on my collarbone. I threw up violently, unable to control myself, the pain overwhelming, keep crawling. Screaming, bloodshot eyes rolling wildly, I reached forward with my good arm, wetly searching for another tooth. I gripped my teeth, blood squirting between them as my fingers wrapped around something solid. The pig bit down again, its tongue twisting my body so its molars could snap me on its knees. The pain brought darkness, but my howling screams forced my eyes to remain open. "Jesus, make it stop," I bellowed, my trembling hand still gripping the tooth ahead of me. "Please, make it fucking stop." I ground my teeth together so hard they cracked, screaming as I slowly pulled my body deeper into the mouth. Something was changing. The tight walls of its throat squeezed my head and I realized I was almost through. "Come on, you motherfucker. Come on," I begged, vocal cords cracking. I reached ahead of me and grabbed onto a thick wad of flesh. My hand felt like it was splitting and the pig bit down on me again. I gasped, blood exploding from my mouth and a great gush of red. It had pierced through my stomach, obliterating my insides like bloated noodles. Darkness rushed in on me, and I was in too much shock to even scream. With the last of my strength, right as the blackness took me, I pulled myself forward one last time and felt myself slide down its throat. Darkness. Falling. Screaming. I was screaming. Heat. Heat so intense I thought I would melt. Clanging. Something was hammering on metal. Colors and images flew past me so quickly I could only make out their shape. Blood poured into my eyes. I felt like I would keep falling forever. Suddenly my eyes snapped open and I was falling, my breath rushing back into my lungs in a great wave of purity. My face bounced off wood floor and I cried out as I felt my nose break. I tasted blood and saw stars. I'd stopped falling. There was a ring of burning fire around my throat and I felt impossibly thirsty. I was lying on the floor. I slowly opened my eyes again and in the darkness began to fade like morning mist under a hot sun. Colors blended together and shapes came into focus. I was in my woodshed. I reached up around my throat and grasped at the source of the heat. It was the rope I had hung myself with, but now it was severed, releasing me from the grip of death. Relief rolled over me in overwhelming waves of thanks. I curled up on the floor and sobbed, tears dripping from my eyes onto the dirty floor. My body shook, unbroken, as I wept. Wet hoarse cries rising from my quivering lips. I had been spared. I was alive again. From my spot on the floor, I turned my eyes upward, my voice crackling. "Thank you, God. Oh, thank you." I fell into another fit of uncontrollable sobbing. "I promise I won't waste my life again. I promise I'll make things right. I'll fix everything." I don't know how long it was before I got up. Time seemed to stretch for eternity. My mind refused to rebuild. The horrors of what I had just witnessed crushing me. But I knew I would do everything I could to make the most out of my life. I was going to live every day to the fullest. I would devote myself to helping others in dark times. I would reach out to as many S-words as I could and try to save them from what awaited on the other side. I didn't want anyone else to have to witness the horrors of S-word. I didn't want anyone else to have to feed the pig. In 1999, I killed a man and his wife with a baseball bat for abusing me as a child in the early 90s. I got 20 years in a mental institution. I was born in 1983. We moved into this neighborhood in 1989. There was this guy who had a family, a wife and 2 children. That seemed pretty nice. However, we never really got to do anything with them. However, he would offer me soda and other drinks if I would go into his shed and look at our cars. The first time he essayed me was in 1993. I was 10. He showed me his cars, then pushed me down, and then did some stuff to me. At first, I didn't know what was happening and didn't think much of it until I realized he was R-wording me. He then hit me and said if I told his wife or anybody about it, he would kill me. He even pulled a gun in my face once. It was disgusting. I couldn't sleep at night. I was scared to tell anyone. I didn't want to be known as a person who was abused by a neighbor. And it went on for almost 2 years. When I was turning 15, 1998, the full realization of what had happened hit me. I was R-worded as a child. I became depressed and started planning revenge. I had played baseball before, so we had some bats in the shed. I plotted to get revenge on him for ruining my life and relationships. It was January 25th, 1999. It was after 5 p.m., and I grabbed a camcorder and went out to the shed and grabbed a baseball bat. I told my mom I was going to shovel his driveway. There was a snowstorm, but I wasn't. I knocked on his door, and his wife opened. I swung the bat at her, and she collapsed. Then I heard screaming from his kids. I had the camcorder in one hand and the bat in my other hand. I recorded the whole thing. He began to run. He was sitting on the couch watching TV. I chased him into the bathroom, where I destroyed the door while screaming at him. When I broke it down, he was in the bathtub screaming. As I swung the bat at him for 2 whole minutes, every time I hit him, his face got worse. I just swung and never cared. I let him die while I ran into the room. I put my camcorder down as I broke the door, and his kids were near his wife, who was knocked out. I told them to go into their rooms and to leave me alone. They were crying. I swung the bat at his wife a few times until she was dead. Then I called 911 and said I'd killed them. I killed both of them. They were dead. The prosecutor understood what had happened, and it was relieved that he had been beating his wife, and even his children sometimes. So they sent me to a mental institution, but they didn't charge me with murder. They said I had been affected by the abuse and that the killing of him was justified, but the wife was not. I was sent to the institution for 20 years, and now I'm out. I have no intention of committing any more crimes. Days in the Dark, written by Saturday. When I was 8 years old, my brother Elliot went missing. He was just 13 years old, but older siblings have this aspirational quality to them. He just didn't come home one day. They looked for days, but couldn't find any trace of him. I was too young to understand what was going on, so I had to sit in my room and play with my Legos, hoping there'd be a knock on the door telling me that things would be okay. There never was that kind of knock. They didn't find him. As days turned to weeks, the search party stopped. But even after everyone went home, I was still out looking for him. I'd take the long road home from school. I'd go down paths I hadn't checked. I had a crumpled up map in my pocket with circles around places that I knew he liked, and I was hell-bent on checking them all. People don't just disappear. It doesn't work like that. But after a while, there were no places left to check, no circles left to draw, and Elliot was still gone. Last thing he said to me was, "Later, Gator." I don't think you ever truly come to terms with something like that. Once you've run into an impossible question, you look for answers in everything. I got really into puzzles and brain teasers, not because it was fun, but because leaving unsolved mysteries could give me this immense sense of dread. I was a great student and one of the top contenders in the debate club. Again, not because I enjoyed it, but because I hated not knowing. When I got a little older, I started volunteering for search and rescue parties. I'd made myself known with local law enforcement and informed them that I'd gladly volunteer. I figured if I couldn't find Elliot, perhaps finding someone else's missing brother or sister was the second best thing. At the very least, it could help me sleep at night. I know there's a lot of people saying, get over it, but you can only get over it so much. I'm in my early 30s now. You can forget their face and the hopes you had growing up, but you can't forget the impact they had on you. You can't forget your own lived experience and the damage those years of uncertainty have left. Even if I never were to hear the name Elliot again, I can never forget the feeling of having the trajectory of my life take a sudden left turn. I'd like to talk about a search party I signed up for a couple of years back. At that time, I had been a part of dozens of organized searches. I knew some of the people involved, and I was familiar with the gear. I got there early, taking some time off work. I put on the high visibility vest, the gloves, and got the backpack. Radio, water, flashlight, a couple of chocolate bars, a first aid kit in a waterproof bag. Now, I never found someone on a search like that, but that didn't mean I never would. You must believe in the best case scenario. We weren't handed a GPS, which surprised me. Turns out we were going underground, so we were handed these filtration masks to protect us from harmful dust and dead air. The missing person was a 17-year-old urban explorer. I live in a city with a metro system, and he'd been exploring an abandoned station on the outskirts of town. The family had been notified of a social media post pointing at the approximate location, but the details were sketchy. To help with the search, power had been restored to this part of the tunnel. Most of the emergency lights were meant to last for years, so there shouldn't be too much of a problem getting around. We were assigned into sections and teams. We were instructed to only follow lit-up corridors and hallways. However, as parts of the station had been abandoned mid-construction, there would be dark sections that were unfinished. If we found such an area, we were ordered to call it in and ask for further instructions. And with that, we were off. I was a bit miffed about not getting to see the abandoned station platform. That thing was supposed to be huge. Instead, I was assigned to one of the maintenance tunnels. It was originally meant to be house heating pipes, but the pipes were never added. Instead, there were these lines across the wall and the occasional holes in the ceiling. You could tell they must have been surprised about the project shutting down. I found a whole toolbox abandoned by a half-mounted door. There were some personal items still in it. I was in a team of 4 people. We went down the hall slowly and methodically, calling out to the missing person as we went. We stuck to our side of the search and kept in radio contact with the organizer. It was hard to see what all the spaces were supposed to be, as we'd occasionally come across entire rooms with little to nothing in them. It made it hard to explain what we'd checked, as we couldn't accurately describe what was what. Was this supposed to be a control room or some kind of plumbing junction? Where on the map exactly was this supposed to be? We came to an unusually long corridor that split off in 3 directions. While staying within earshot, we decided to split up. I got all the way to the end of the hallway, where I stopped by a heavy door. The thing was almost solid black and as heavy as cast iron. I got the impression that it was some kind of security door, maybe leading to an underground bomb shelter. I called out to the others in my team, but didn't get a response. I called it in on the radio as I wrestled with the door. It was pitch black inside. The lights were out. I'm looking at the dark room at the end of the hallway. See, I think? The one on the right, second right, past the boilers? Just stay within radio contact and leave the door open. The operator responded. Don't go so far you can't see the light. Got it. I entered the room. The room was a little smaller than the hallway, tickling the top of my head when I stood upright. If I balanced on my toes, I could feel the strap from the mask touch the ceiling. I tried to figure out what the space was meant for, but I couldn't make sense of it. There was only one entry point, and there were no holes in the wall for cable management or ventilation. This was completely isolated. I tapped the radio again, swaying my flashlight back and forth. There's a corridor going deeper, I said. Is someone watching my back? Yeah, there's someone right outside, the operator assured me. You go on ahead. I took a couple of steps further, shining my flashlight down the hall. The light couldn't reach the end of it. It was such a long tunnel that it triggered my sense of vertigo. Like for a split second, it was sucking me in. I had this uncomfortable thought that maybe this was the feeling of going missing, facing this endless darkness you can't come back from. Maybe Elliot had thought the same thing once. I didn't like it. I was only a couple of feet from the door, but I decided I wouldn't take any chances. I turned to leave, and as I did, the door swung shut. At first, I didn't register what happened. A door closing isn't a big deal. It might be misaligned or there could be a breeze. This wasn't the case here. This door was solid metal. It wouldn't accidentally close on its own. I grabbed the handle and twisted and pulled, but it wouldn't budge. I couldn't even push it down. "I'm stuck," I radioed in. "The door closed. I can't get it open." "Sorry about that. It happens," the operator sighed. "Some of the hinges on these things are rusted shut. Stay by the door. Someone will go get you. Keep your flashlight on." I stayed by the door for at least 20 minutes, knocking on it occasionally just to see if anyone would knock back. They didn't. After a while, my flashlight flickered. It was far too soon for the batteries to die. "Okay, I'm going dark here," I said. "Someone needs to get me out now." "They're having trouble finding your door," the operator responded. "Far end of the right side hall. Section C past the boiler." "That's what you said?" "That's right. There's no door here. There's an open door frame and something that looks like a closet, but no door." "That's impossible." "Look, you might have the wrong order. If you went past the boilers, you could be in section C or D. There are parallel corridors. In that case, you can just follow the right-hand wall until you get to the other side. There's another search party already there." Right-hand wall. Other corridor. Got it. I followed their instructions, grasping the dying flashlight. As I got to the seemingly endless tunnel, the light finally gave out. It was pitch black. I could close my eyes, and nothing would change. Being in that kind of darkness is so disorienting. You start to imagine how easy it is to get turned around, to the point where you're wondering if you really are turned around. But I kept my hand on the wall and stuck to the right. "Is it far?" I asked. "I can't hear them." "It's a bit of a walk. There should be some functioning pipes running overhead about halfway though, so let me know as soon as you hear running water." I couldn't hear anything but my own breathing reverberating down the hall. But if there was running water down there, I wouldn't miss it for the world. I kept my hand on the smooth concrete wall and continued a step at a time. You have to go slow, as even the slightest shift in elevation can send you crashing face first into the ground. When you're exposed to that kind of prolonged darkness, your head kind of fills in the blanks. You start to imagine what the space around you looks like. It plays tricks on you. For example, I started thinking I was running my hand across wallpaper instead of concrete. It was smooth enough that while walking, you might trick yourself. But if you're just using your fingerprints to see the world, you can imagine yourself in all kinds of places. My childhood home had a rough paper textured wallpaper. It didn't take a huge leap of imagination to pretend I was back there, sneaking up to use the bathroom in the middle of the night. I ended up taking my gloves off just to get a better idea of what I was touching. I got to a fork in the road and still hadn't heard any running water. I pulled up the radio and called it in. "There's a split here," I said. "Should I stay right or go straight ahead?" "A split," the operator called back. "There shouldn't be a split." Are you sure?" "Yeah, there's a split. Straight ahead or another right." "Wait," the voice mumbled back. Wait. Don't tell me. Is the ceiling really low?" "Yes." "Why didn't you say so? Oh man, This changes things. I could hear them talking to someone in the background, forgetting to take their hands off the button. Then they returned to me. This is gonna get complicated. Turns out there were 3 other rooms with the same description as mine, and neither of them were in the sections I described. I must have veered off course. I had to walk around to gather data points to identify which of the rooms I was in, but it proved more difficult than they'd imagined. For example, one of the corridors was supposed to lead to a junction, and another would lead to a ceiling grate. However, the room at the end of the corridor was incomplete, meaning we couldn't tell what it was supposed to be. I had to go deeper to figure out where I was. I would occasionally run into ladders, but they led nowhere. There were supposed to be entrances from the street, but these had long since been filled and paved. I still had to climb each one just to make sure they hadn't missed one. The mask on my face felt more and more oppressive, like my body was packed into a box. Despite being able to move my arms around, I could feel this claustrophobic stone building in my chest, hammering a counter tune to my increasing heartbeat. If I listened to it too much, I couldn't breathe. I pushed myself down another corridor, only to stop at a dead end. There was a round hole in the wall, just big enough for someone my size. That's good, the operator assured me. That means there's space for heating. If my calculations are correct, that means you are in one of these 2 hallways. I need you to go inside. No way. It's going to tilt downward for about 5 feet and either go straight ahead or upward. If it goes upward, you can go straight to the top. I can have someone meet you right then and there. If it goes forward, you have to go ahead, then take a left, and then forward again. That puts you in the same corridor as me. Either way, you have to push through. I put one knee up and traced the edges of the hole. It was too small for me to crawl on all fours. I had to put my torso in and drag myself forward with the palm of my hands. The concrete was so smooth, I couldn't get a grip with my fingers, gloves or no gloves. My gear kept getting snagged on the edges. I stopped to have a drink of water and splashed a little on my face, psyching myself up. 5 feet, then up or forward. That was it. I crawled in, inches at a time. I had to stay calm. If I tried to take a deep breath, I could feel my gear pushing against the walls. It didn't hurt, but it was this constant reminder of how isolated I was. My heart was beating through my ears with nothing to distract from it. There wasn't the slightest hint of an echo. I felt the tunnel tilt slightly downward. Not much, but enough that pushing myself back up would be impossible. If I went ahead, I wouldn't be getting back up. Not unless I got space to turn around. You sure it's just a couple of feet? I asked. You absolutely sure? There are only 2 rooms with that kind of vent. No matter which one you're in or which direction you're coming from, you'll be out shortly. I swallowed. I could feel the sweat stinging my eyes. I wanted to throw my mask away, like that was the thing keeping me back, but I had to stay rational. I pushed myself forward and slid downward. The tunnel evened out. I felt around for an upward exit but couldn't find one. That meant we'd isolated exactly where I was and I had to push forward. My palms were so dusty that I could barely get a grip. I had to resort to rolling onto my back and use the rubber soles on my shoes for traction, effectively kicking myself backward. I could feel the heat of my breath gathering along the tunnel walls. Then the tunnel opened. It was so sudden that I lost my balance. haphazardly falling out headfirst. I did an awkward flip, landing hard on my left hip and shoulder. It wasn't a long fall, but enough for something to get sprained. I didn't want to imagine what the bruise might look like. I grabbed my radio and held on to it for dear life. "I'm out," I groaned. "I made it to the room." "There's only one way forward," the operator said. "Go forward, then a left, and forward again. Once you see the light, let me know. I'm right at the other end." "That's it? That's really it?" "There's no other possible way." I got up, dusted myself off, and checked my gear. It was all there. Things would be okay. I followed the instructions. I went forward and took a left. At the next fork, I went straight ahead, double checking with the operator every step of the way. They assured me it was just around the corner. A matter of minutes at most. At one point, he said he was banging a wrench on a pipe and that I'd be able to hear it any minute now. Now I just had to go straight until I came to a door. I was jogging, keeping my hand on the wall for balance. There were these small gaps in the wall every 10 feet or so where there was supposed to be space for pipes. I'd walk, feel the gap, walk, feel the gap, over and over. Then I dragged my hand across someone's face. Open eyes, a nose, teeth, and hair. I stopped and turned around, my hand shaking like I'd touched a flame. "Is anyone there?" I asked. There was no answer. I debated within my own head, trying to figure out if I should head back and check again or keep going. Maybe it was the missing person. We were still out there looking for someone after all. The search hadn't been called off. I took a couple of steps back and carefully reached out with my right hand. My fingers were anticipating the touch of skin, to the point where I could imagine their heat. But as I reached further, all I felt was concrete. There was no one there. I checked thoroughly, but there was nothing. I did hear a little metallic sound, though, as something stuck to my shoe. A small key. It had some kind of etched motif, like a sunflower. Maybe a blue one. I put it in my pocket with my first aid kit and kept going, making sure I hadn't been turned around. As I got to the end of the hallway, I reached for the door. "All right, this is it," I said. "I can't hear you, but I'm at the end of the hall. There's a door there. Just open it and I'll have someone come meet you." I fumbled around looking for a handle, but couldn't find one. I checked that wall 3 times. Every inch of it. It was a dead end. "There's nothing here," I gasped. "There's nothing here." "Calm down. It should be on your left." "There's nothing on my left. Nothing on my right. It's a dead end. It's a goddamn..." I smacked my head with the radio and heard a click. Not as in something breaking, but something clicking into place. I turned the radio over in my hand, feeling around the back. The battery cover had been slightly off. That hit had put it back in place. I opened the cover just to make sure I closed it correctly. There were no batteries in the radio. I double and triple checked. There were no batteries. "Hello?" I asked. "Operator?" I held the radio up to my lips, clicking the receiver a couple of times. There was no sound, just the clack of plastic. "Hello?" There was no response. I collapsed against the wall, taking a moment to collect my thoughts. It didn't make sense. The battery cover had been closed even when I smacked my head with the radio. I would have heard 2 batteries tumbling to the floor. I couldn't have lost them earlier, as then the operator couldn't have talked to me in the corridor. Something wasn't adding up. I swept my hands across the floor, checking to see if the batteries were there somewhere. They weren't. But I couldn't just sit in the dark and wait either. I had to do something. Try something. This was another puzzle to figure out. There is always a solution, and sometimes you just have to make the best of the hand you're dealt. By this time, I'd drawn a mental map. All these years of figuring things out had conditioned me to collect and preserve information. It was like recounting the alphabet backwards. I just had to follow a learned sequence. I decided I was going to backtrack and try to find my way back to where I started. I made my way back to the hole in the wall and climbed inside. The upward tilt would be difficult, but I was confident that I could make it. I crawled, holding my hands out, only to feel the tunnel dip downward. I stopped dead in my tracks, my mind spinning. This wasn't possible. I'd been crawling down. It couldn't possibly lead further down. I crawled a little further, reaching with a full arm. This couldn't have been where I came from. Were there two separate tunnels? That was the only explanation. I pushed myself all the way back out and couldn't find a second hole in the wall. I figured I must have been turned around somewhere, taken a wrong turn, went straight instead of right at a split or something like that. I had to slowly and methodically map out my surroundings, one room and hallway at a time. It's easy to second guess yourself in the dark. You have nothing to rely on but your thoughts and impressions, and those are easy to misunderstand. It can be challenging even in a familiar environment. Ask anyone who's had to go to the bathroom during a power outage. I was somewhere deep underground in an unmapped area without light or direction. I must have wandered for hours. I mapped out 2 branching corridors, leading to 3 rooms and 4 dead ends. There were no doors, and only one hole in the wall leading to a tunnel. And yes, I checked it again. It kept going downward. No, I didn't proceed that way. I ended up in one of the smaller rooms, rolling up my high visibility vest into a pillow. I drank some water, but saved some for later, and chowed down on a chocolate bar. The others were probably looking for me by now. I tried not to think about the radio. That was a piece of the puzzle that made my stomach roll. No matter how I twisted and turned that thought, I couldn't get it to make sense. If it was empty all along, I was the problem. If it wasn't empty until that last click of the battery cover, there had to be batteries on the floor. I couldn't find any, but that didn't mean there weren't any. And yet, I didn't have a clear answer. I ended up spending the night down there. It's difficult to sleep in that kind of darkness. After a while, you don't know if your eyes are open or closed. You don't know if you're sleeping or not. The barrier between imagination and reality is paper thin. And you start thinking about whatever you dream about is really there. There could be someone in the room, just inches away, and I would have no way to know for sure. It was the first time in many years that I thought about Elliot. Not just the reality of him going missing, but him as a person. I imagined what he might have felt like during those last few hours or days. Had there been someone with him, or had he faded away in the dark? He and I had always been very similar. Chances are, we would think the same thing in the final moments. And if this was one of my final moments, I was scared. He would be too. I tried not to think about it. There was no way to know for sure. And imagining the worst wasn't helping anyone. He could have run away, eloped with a pretty girl, and lived in some hippie coop. He might resurface in 20 years. You can't tell the future. But somehow, a part of me felt like it knew. It knew he'd gone someplace dark, where he would never come back. Maybe it was the next day, or just a couple hours, but at some point, I got up. I decided I was going to check the tunnel again. There must have been some kind of misunderstanding. I drank my last gulp of water and followed the map in my mind. The layout was different. There were more rooms and shorter corridors. If you took two lefts, there were a couple of stairs. There was a larger room with a rounded floor for draining liquid. I would go down the same hallway twice and I could swear it was different lengths. I would count my steps and end up with the same result. But one would take a minute to pass, and the next it would take 2. I felt like I was losing my mind. Every time I tried to make clear sense of that place, it seemed to shift and change, like it wasn't finished, in more ways than one, like an approximation of space and dimension. After my third pass around the same rooms, and still not making any sense of it, I took a break. I was leaning back, tapping the back of my head against the wall, as if trying to dislodge a good idea. Instead, I picked up the radio, clicking the receiver, and turning the dials. Now it was just a plastic brick. No better than a paperweight. I checked the back, unlatching the battery cover, still empty. Then, a noise. There's a way out, you know. The crackling voice came from the radio, but there was something about it that resonated with me, like the reverb was tickling the back of my mind. "You're not real," I mumbled. "I'm hallucinating." "Are you sure?" It's like a sensory deprivation tank. If your senses stop getting input, your brain starts firing random signals just to keep them occupied. Otherwise, it sort of atrophies. So I'm just a random brain signal? I would suppose so. Interesting, the voice continued. So that means whatever I say is an expression of yourself? No, it's a random noise. You might as well be a cat's meow or a leaf in the wind. But what do I sound like to you? Try to categorize me. Make sense of me. Who am I? The voice was a man. Age was difficult to tell through a radio, but I was guessing they weren't a teenager or a senior, adult or middle-aged, with a slight hint of an accent similar to my own. That was a curious choice. Where's that accent from? I asked. Wherever you want it to be from. Cute deflection. I wonder why I'm imagining you like that. Maybe you're trying to express something. Why would I care about some random person with an accent? Maybe I'm not a random person. I leaned the radio away, closed my eyes, and shook my head. Don't do that, I whispered. Don't say things like that. I wandered the dark for a bit, desperately trying to make sense of my surroundings. The number of steps on the stairs were different. The corridor turned right instead of left. The ceiling was lower, and the angle of the tilt in the floor of the big room was deeper. I thought I felt a door handle, but upon double back, I realized it was a clasp for a missing pipe. I talked out loud all that time, getting the occasional response from the radio. I knew it wasn't real, but it kept me from digesting random thoughts into something rancid. I had to stay focused on the task ahead and find a way forward. There had to be a way forward. There's no such thing as an impossible space. The operator wasn't trying to get in my head or make wild claims. Most of the time, he was just listening, adding the occasional remark when I made an incorrect statement or misinformed decision. And when I came back to the same room I'd already been in for the umpteenth time, tearing my own hair out with frustration, that voice came through loud and clear. Do you want a suggestion? You're not real. Then what's the harm? It doesn't make sense, I snapped back. I'm talking to a wall. Anything that comes from this is, at best, accidental. You have any better ideas? I flung the radio across the room, shattering it against the wall on the other side. I heard the plastic clatter and roll down the tilted floor, pooling at a small grate in the center of the room. Some of the smaller pieces trickled through. I pushed my hands against my ears, trying to clear my thoughts. Are you done? The voice wasn't coming from the radio anymore. It was resonating through me, like my bones were picking up a radio signal. I didn't know what to say. Before I could open my mouth, it answered for me. Then let's get going. I was out of ideas. My tongue was going dry, and my head was swimming from prolonged stress. I could feel this sense of exhaustion seeping into my bones, turning my movements slow and sloppy. I was dragging my feet and not even touching the walls anymore. If I stumbled or walked into something, that was on me. That was fine. The operator mentioned a few suggestions. Take a left turn instead of going forward, stick to the right, 3 steps back, sharp left. When I could be bothered to filter out that voice from the screaming in the back of my mind, I did as I was told. And slowly but surely, I began to notice things changing. There were different rooms, and the air grew denser. There was a strange smell in the air. The concrete started to feel different, more porous. Maybe this wasn't better, but at least it was new. I started hearing strange noises. There were machines overhead, pressured air rushing just out of sight, flowing water. Why'd you leave me down here? I asked. You tricked me into this. You were already tricked, the voice responded. I've been trying to get you out, but it shifts things around. You told me I could go in, and that there were people backing me up. I was trying to put you at ease when I figured this out. Figured what out? What are we doing here? It wants you to go a certain way. Haven't you ever wondered why you're always so drawn to look in places you weren't supposed to? It wants you to find it. And now, you're very close to doing so. And trust me, you don't want that. Why not? I said, shrugging. Why don't I want that? Because I know what happens when you go too far. When you can't turn back. Things like this want to be found in deep, dark places. I smacked the side of my head, as if trying to get better reception in my mind. Like that would somehow filter out the nonsense. I came down another fork in the path, left and right. I turned right, as the operator rolled back in my ear. Go the other way, he said. You're getting too close. You gotta turn away. I didn't listen. I kept going forward until I could hear something. There were noises ahead. Chatter. My heart raced as I rushed forward. Please, turn around, the operator asked. Turn around right now. I could hear people talking. I turned a corner, and for the first time in days, I could see a door. I could see a door. There was a faint light coming from underneath, and I could hear people walking around in the other room. I ran up to it and pushed down on the handle. Someone on the other side was calling out, asking if anyone was there. The key, the operator begged. I left you a key. I pushed down on the handle and stopped, fumbling around with my right hand. I could feel the key still in my pocket. I'd completely forgotten about it. There is a way out, but this ain't it. I promise you this ain't it. Please don't do this. Please don't go that way. Why not? I whispered. They're right there. It's not real. I made the same mistake. Don't go in. My hand stayed on the handle. Someone urged me to open it. Someone asked me to take a peek. They were laughing with relief, saying how pleased they were to finally have found me, but something didn't feel right. I stepped back. Open the door on your end, I said out loud. It's not working. There wasn't as much as a tug on the handle. They came with excuses. Someone had their hands full. Someone said it didn't open from their end. Someone pretended not to hear me. The key in my pocket felt heavier as I traced the outline of the etched sunflower with my thumb. This was real. That was a real thing. What was on the other side of that door wasn't. I stepped back, and as I did, the light behind the door vanished. The voices disappeared, leaving the hallway suddenly deathly quiet. What do I do? I whispered. What do I do? The operator whispered back, go the other way, and don't stop for nothing. I turned around and ran as a door creaked behind me. I heard wet skin slapping against the concrete floor. Stumbling forward at an awkward pace, I headed straight, then took a sharp right. The air was growing more dense, more warm. I traced my hand along the right wall, only for it to shift. The concrete grew hot and soft, like sand from the beach. Then the grains turned fine, until it was more like a sludge. It was like dragging your hand across raw chicken. It wants you to stop, the operator said. It's trying to distract you. Keep going. The hallway would contract and expand like a breathing entity. At times, the floor would roll as if trying to swallow me. I could feel it tilt in different angles, making the way forward twist and turn. One moment I'm going forward. Next moment the hallway tilted upward, and I'm using ridges in the floor to climb a makeshift ladder. Then I'm falling on my back, holding on for dear life as I'm thrown this way and that. All the while, something at the bottom is waiting for me to drop. Something that came out of that door and who's tired of playing games. I was soaking wet when I came to what felt like a dead end. There was this slimy substance covering the wall, but I could push against it. It felt like trying to pop a soap-drenched balloon. Using scissors from the first aid kit, I managed to cut a big enough hole for my hand to fit and rip all the way through. As I did, everything rolled again, as something screamed in pain, not with sound, but with movement, convulsion, and heat. I could feel the compressed air press against my eardrums, making my sense of balance shiver. There was a door at the end of the hallway. It was chained. This is it, the operator said. Get the key. Get the key and go. It was coming down the hall, heading straight for me. It was so fast. How could it be so fast? I reached for my key and felt around for a lock. There was one. I slotted the key in, turned, and pulled. There was a click, and the chain rattled to the floor. As I swung the door open and dashed through, I turned around for a moment just to close it behind me. As I did, I saw something staring back at me from the dark. Something with milk white skin and atrophied eyes, and the wild grown maw of an invertebrate predator. The door closed and I stepped back, catching my breath. There was light here. The operator came through, but the voice was barely reaching me. I could hear scratches like interface, like I was just out of reach. Just keep going, he said. Not far. Got it from here. What about you, I asked. Are you still in there? Went the wrong way. I paused for a moment, looking back. The light was faint, but my eyes were still adjusting. I couldn't focus. Is that you, I asked? I mean, really you? There was a short pause as the world came into view. The operator thought about it for a moment, then sighed. Is what it is, he said. Later, Gator. I followed the sound of machinery and wandered straight out onto the platform. Early commuters saw me wandering out of a maintenance tunnel, and I was approached by a janitor. I wasn't making any sense at that point. When law enforcement came to pick me up, I was delirious. It took them hours to identify me, and I was of little help. I'd been wandering down there for almost 3 full days. I was dehydrated. They had found the missing urban explorer and shifted their rescue attempt to me, trying to figure out exactly where I'd gone off the beaten path. No one managed to find the black door that I was describing, or the corridor where it was supposed to have been. Retracing my steps seemed impossible, as nothing was the way I described it. They couldn't explain what I'd experienced. My clothes were covered in a thin layer of hydrochloric acid and potassium chloride in a mix similar to gastric acid, like I'd been walking through a massive diluted stomach. There were interviews, questionnaires, and even a short article in a local newspaper. Most wanted to talk about the fear of being lost in the dark and what it does to your mind. It lost its novelty after about a week, and I was back at work like nothing happened. I still do search and rescue on a volunteer basis sometimes. I'm a bit more careful, sure, but you can't change what you are overnight. And yet, I think something has changed. I'm asking different questions nowadays, and I'm not sure I want an answer. I can't say for sure what I was doing during those 3 days, or what I experienced, but I know what I heard. I know I wasn't alone. And in those rare moments where I think it was all some fake, made-up nonsense from the back of my mind, I look into the top drawer in my nightstand. That's where I keep a small key with an etched sunflower that someone left for me in the dark. If you find a painting of your childhood home, do this before it ruins your life. Written by Sunhead Story. This one's from my girlfriend. When I was a child, around the age of 6, perhaps younger, I used to visit my uncle's house on occasion with my mum and Nan. Each time I was there, I would go to my uncle's bedroom to look at the mummy that laid on his bed. That's what I thought I was seeing. An adult woman that seemed to look like they were wrapped up in bandages or some material. My uncle was the kind that would tease you or wind you up, so I never believed it was real, just something he'd rigged to scare me. Each time I went to his house, I would drag my mum or my Nan into that room to show them. And frustratingly, each and every time, they would claim not to be able to see a very obvious mummy laid out on the bed. It got to the point one day, after dragging my mom and Nan up to my uncle's room, and them not believing me, that after they left, I stayed to watch the mummy lay in bed. I stayed in the doorway, the furthest I would ever go, with the side of the bed facing me, and glared as angrily as a little girl could at the woman in bed. Then it sat up and turned to face me. I froze. It was when the thing started to get off the bed towards me that I discovered my legs again and ran. Years later, my Nan took me and my friend to my uncle's house to dog sit while he was away. It just so happened that his bedroom was where we would be having our sleepover. The room had been changed and there was no mummy this time around, but retelling this story was enough to freak us both out the night, though it didn't stop us sleeping. My mum and Nan can recall me asking about the bandaged woman in the bed and other things I'd seen and experienced as a child, but no one else had experienced the mummy in that house. Fine again. I think I had an encounter with a Skinwalker or a Wendigo. I'm 25 male. I live in Utah, and I'm curious if any of you have seen anything like this before. I'm pretty sure I saw a Wendigo or a Skinwalker. I know it sounds strange or crazy. I don't really believe in those things, and I'm regularly skeptical when it comes to the paranormal. This happened to me when I was 17 and in high school and living with my parents. My house at the time was in a very small town. The backyard faced open, empty fields and mountains for miles before you reached another civilization at all. My best friend lived next door and shared this field as a backyard in a way. I have to explain that his house was built on a different street that ended in the field with a small cul-de-sac. I think there was supposed to be more houses built on the street to expand the town, but they clearly never got around to it. So his driveway was basically in this cul-de-sac, even though no other houses were built there. This matters later in the story though. I used to stay the night at my friend's house a lot in high school because I didn't have the best relationship with my parents. Every once in a while, we would wake up to hear dragging and a weird gargling sound from the back porch. His room was a basement room with the window well to his back porch. It would happen maybe a couple times a month, but whenever we would gather the courage to check, nothing would be back there. This happened for years. One night haunts my friend and I to this day. My friend was getting ready to move, and we would stay up all night playing games and watching movies. We decided to go on a music drive to just vibe. So we hopped in his truck with high beams and swung out of the driveway, turning them on towards the field to use the roundabout. The light illuminated this thing. It looked like a person, but it wasn't. It was naked on all fours, abnormally large, especially its limbs that seemed to fold under itself in an unnatural way. Its pale skin clung to it like it had to be stretched onto it, but the part that still sends shivers down my spine is its face. Its jaw hung open to this gaping black maw, like a snake unhinging its jaw to eat. Its black eyes glistened in the light as it looked at us, but just as it turned to see us, it quickly scurried backwards, almost like it was on rewind into the brush of the field. My friend and I were pale as ghosts. We both looked at each other and were like, "Did you see that too?" We were shaken. Let's just say we tried to have a good rest of the night, but we couldn't believe what we just saw. We ended up just sitting there in his basement with guns ready and waiting to hear the gargling and dragging again. But we never did. Sorry that it's not very climactic, but it's true. I now don't live in that town anymore. There are times when I visit there though, the empty field still feels like it's watching and waiting, even though I can't see it. And I still think about it to this very day. The reason I always keep all the doors locked. Back with another one, as I will likely post as I remember them. I've done so much healing this year that buried memories keep resurfacing, like this little gem. This was some years ago when I was living in a different city. I hadn't really been on my own all that long, and my housing situation fell apart at the last minute, so I had to scramble to figure it out, meaning, you guessed it, random roommates. Now, the year before, I had a random roommate that was the most amazing person and ended up becoming a great friend, so I figured this would be the same. It was not. But that's actually not the focus of the story. Enter the roommates. Ben, who I did actually know a bit from the previous year and was becoming friends with, Tom and Mike. Now, this was the very first couple days after move-in, and we'd all hung out to get to know each other a bit better. But Tom and Mike hadn't fully moved in yet. It was a big old house separated by a floor and the top level locked at the stairs. This is important to note. Ben and I lived upstairs with Tom and Mike downstairs. I've always been paranoid and definitely have good reason to. So when I'm home, all doors are locked. When I leave, all doors are locked. I sleep with my bedroom locked. I was home alone with Ben at work and Tom and Mike sort of in and out of moving stuff in. I'll note here that both had a lot of expensive stuff, like in the 5-figure range. Well, I was watching something on my laptop in my room. Bedroom locked and both entrances to my part of the house locked. I started hearing a lot of noise coming from downstairs, sounding like doors and cupboards opening, furniture moving, etc. And I figured it's just Tom or Mike until I hear footsteps coming up the stairs. I was technically supposed to be somewhere at the time, which they knew, but it had been canceled last minute, so no one would have known I was home. And they had no reason to come upstairs when they knew both of us were supposed to be gone. That was when I got panicky, hearing them come closer and closer to the top of the stairs. I've never sat so still. Then the knob began to jiggle. I could hear it clearly as my room was closest to the entryway. At this point, I'm on with 911 whispering that someone is in my house without giving away that I'm there to whoever it was. The house was super close to downtown and cops arrived in mere minutes, but they were the longest of my life at that moment. The downstairs were completely ransacked, like something out of a movie. It was so surreal to see. They'd taken over $20,000 in electronics. I don't remember the exact amount, just about that, I think. Broken furniture and plates and stuff, even ripped through the mattresses. Turned out Tom and Mike had left the door unlocked when moving. This would be the last time before I fled this house. They were gone before the cops showed, so I'd spent the next several months afraid they'd come back, though it would turn out to be the least of my future worries. So glad that I always locked doors. Considering the way downstairs looked, I don't know what they would have done to me. To whoever was on the other side